Okay, I'm preparing our live stream here. We're using a new live stream process. I want to make sure I get it right. All right, here we are. Here we go.
But not for the reason you think. I found this free newsletter that tracks the best.
You there, Todd?
Yes, I am. Hold on. There we
Okay.
go. Years to welcome everybody, Glenn.
I'm to welcome everybody.
Yes, I said it like 3 times.
Geez, I was thinking about something else. Welcome, everybody.
Yes, okay.
Veterans
Let me
Breakfast
welcome
Club.
it. You welcome everybody. Okay.
This is the Veterans Breakfast Club with Todd DiPastino, our executive director and founder. I am Glenn Flickinger, the host of Greatest Generation Live and a board member. Welcome to all of you on our Thursday night program. How'd I do, Todd?
That's perfect. Well done.
I just copy whatever you and Sean do. No, it's a great pleasure to have everybody. We're just kidding around. We have I think, an interesting program tonight with a couple of very interesting guests. We're going to cover part 2 of the B-26 in World War II. If everybody recalls, last year we did many programs on the air war over Europe, covered the B-17 to the B-24 to the point where I think I could fly one. And a lot of great stories, incredible courage, incredible bravery by those men. I've got my 100th Bomb Group sweatshirt on from visiting the 100th Bomb Group Air Base last year, which was just a special thrill to walk in the on the same ground, hollowed ground those men walked on. We tried to cover other aspects of the air war, the 15th Air Force. Of course, I don't know, is Ed on tonight? Ed Cottrell. We found Ed Cottrell early last year, I think, or maybe it was the year before, but Ed on a couple of times about the P-47. Ed, let's say hello to Ed. What is he unmuted, Todd? There he is. I'll unmute him.
Hi, Glenn.
Hello, Ed. Good to see you.
Hi, Todd.
Hello, Ed. Are you over your birthday hangover?
Yeah, I'm over my hangover, and I'm doing fine. I just keep looking for Mondays and Thursdays so I can see all my friends that are on the pictures or on the tube, and I enjoy all the programs. They're really great.
That is so great. If people don't know, Ed just celebrated his 102nd birthday a couple weeks ago.
102nd? 100, yeah, that's right. 102nd. Yes. Wow. So Ed, you know, tonight we're talking about the B-26 again. I'm not sure you saw part 1 of the B-26 last.
No, I did not get a chance to see that.
Yeah.
And I have a great admiration for that aircraft. It never got the credit that it deserved because it was a weapon that the Germans did not like. They did not like that plane, and but it never got the credit that it deserved for what it did.
Well, thank you, Ed. That plays right into why we eventually started covering the B-26. We had part
That's
1.
good.
I think you were traveling in Europe doing
Yeah,
that program.
I was. And well, I'm going to be interested to watch this tonight, and I'll just sit back and watch and have a good time. And everybody have a great weekend, great week and weekend.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So tonight we have two guests that are B-26 experts. They were on the part one of our program last December, but we didn't get to their stories. If you remember, we had a B-26 veteran on last December, Willie Williamson, and that ended up taking up 45 minutes or 50 minutes of the program. So we just had time for one of our B-26 stories by Ron Balesta, a colleague of these two gentlemen tonight. But let's welcome them tonight. Oh, Ron. Hi, Ron. Nice to see you. Let's make sure you're unmuted. There you are.
There you go. Yes. Thank
Okay.
you.
Well, thank you for
Very
being
nice. Thank you for your service there. 102. Wow. Woo. Yeah.
But thank you for being back on tonight for part two of this and supporting your colleagues here. Let's introduce them. First, we have retired Colonel Nick Cressy. Nick, please say hello.
Hello.
Okay.
Glad to be here.
Before we get into your story, which we're going to do after Josh's, tell us about your military service.
Well, I enlisted in the Air Force in 1971 as a teenager. Went to weapons school at Lowry Air Force Base for tactical aircraft and got a 1-year vacation in Southeast Asia and Vietnam and Thailand, loading F-4 Phantom jets. And then I came home and loaded B-52 bombers up in North Dakota during the Cold War. Got out in 75, and then I went back in 91 as a direct commission to the U.S. Army Reserve as a medical service corps officer. I was in healthcare administration and civilian side at that time. And so I did 10 years of as a reserve officer, and then 2001 came along, 9/11, and I deployed after that. I went to Norfolk, Virginia for Joint Forces Command. I was at U.S. Northern Command, Army Medical Command, and then I went to Afghanistan with the 82nd Airborne. Came back to Army MedCom again, and then ended up at Northern Command. And in 2012, I had reached the mandatory retirement age, and they said goodbye. And I said, "See you later. Give me my money. I'm out of here." So
Well,
I'm out of there. I'm not in the service anymore.
yeah. Well, what a great service record, though.
Thank
Nick.
you.
And then our other guest tonight is Josh Muri. Josh, please say hello to everybody.
Hello, good afternoon. Let me do a quick introduction.
Hey, yeah, please tell us about your military service.
While Nick was enlisting in 1971, that was the year I was born. And also, like Nick, I did spend time at Lowry. I enlisted in 1992, and my first training base was also Lowry Air Force Base near Denver. I spent 8 years working on F-16s, avionics, and had a good time. I spent time at Edwards Air Force Base, which my grandfather would call Muroc Field, and we'll talk about that. And also spent time in Korea for a year, and then also in Luke Air Force Base in Arizona. And currently my son is a avionics journeyman on F-15s. So it's staying in the family a little bit.
Excellent. Excellent. Just moving up in technology, right?
Some of the F-15s he's working on are pretty dang old, so they've been around a while.
Okay. Well, thanks for both of you being here tonight. We're going to start with just a little bit of a rehash of, because I'm not sure everybody that was on the first program is on tonight, or those, I should say those are on tonight weren't all for the first program. So we just want to cover a little bit, just 5 minutes on sort of the background and history of the B-26. Okay, are we seeing that okay, Todd?
Yes.
Okay, let me get to slideshow and current slide. There it is. What a great rendering of B-26. B-26 came along in, if I could get this right, here we go, in the early 40s, the B-26 Marauder. Very important weapons system, if you will, very important bomber for the U.S. Air Force, or U.S. Army Air Force during World War II. just didn't get the attention that the B-17s and the B-24s got, right? Through 100,000 or more sorties, dropped 150,000 bombs, there were 700 of them. It was, as you can see by the picture, a 2-engine bomber, right? As opposed to the heavies, which were the 4-engine bombers. So being a 2-engine bomber, it had less tonnage of bombs that it could carry. It carried a crew of Nick and Josh, remind me, was it 5, 6 people on a B-26?
It's typically 6.
6. Yep.
6. Pilot, co-pilot, bombardier.
Navigator, nose gunner, engineer.
Right. Okay. And this airplane eventually came to fly what we would characterize sort of like Ed Cottrell's B-47 as the war went on, tactical missions rather than the strategic bombing missions that the heavies, the 17s and 24s flew. So just to be sure, I know our audience is a very educated one. What do we mean by tactical bombing missions? Nick or Josh? Or Ron, for that matter.
Well,
I would
go ahead, Josh.
I would say more medium range, lower altitude, specific target, able to hit the target more precisely. Much faster bomber, needing less fighter escort.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Flew at about, for the most part, say 10,000 feet and lower.
Yeah, and during the Normandy, much lower than that.
Yeah. Involved in the bombing of the tactical bombing of Utah Beach, which we covered a bit last or in December in the first program. Too bad they didn't do that at Omaha Beach as well,
Right.
Because it could come in much lower. I mean, occasionally, depending on the target, they'd be, more or less for a bomber scraping the ground, 1,000 feet or less, I suppose, at time, depending on the target. Right?
And the big problem that day was the weather. So that's what made the B-26 much more efficient.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to spend too much time on this. We talked a lot about this last time, but initially the B-26, this is told over and over again, probably to the point it's a little excessive. In the early models of the B-26, it did have quite a few mechanical problems, made it difficult to fly, that sort of thing. But by 1941, 42, that was pretty much corrected. Do I have that right, guys?
Yeah.
Yes, they corrected the Curtiss propeller blades problem, and they also added, they lengthened the wings to take care of the wing load, and then the tail actually was made taller. That was from Doolittle's recommendations.
Right.
And both of those things contributed to a lower landing speed and more control during slower speeds.
Yeah. Another great contribution by one of my favorite airmen of World War II, General Doolittle, right? Maybe everybody's favorite for that matter. And the only thing I want to show here is I love this picture. I found it when we were doing the research. Maybe one of you guys sent it to me. I don't remember. But I just feel like I'm with these guys in the plane looking at them. You can see I imagine that's the bombardier.
Bombardier navigator, yes.
Bombardier navigator, pilot and co-pilot, and probably in the middle is the turret gunner engineer, top turret engineer.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know how this picture was taken. Weren't any drones back then, but I just think it's a classic picture. And then just the last part of this before we get to Josh's story first. Both these men and Ron, I think maybe, do I recall, you're the president of the B-26 Marauder Historical Society?
Josh is.
Sorry, Josh.
Yes.
That's okay. Ron's a vice president, and Nick is a board member as well.
Okay. So just want to make everybody aware if you're interested in B-26, and we'll have a little bit more about this in Josh's and Nick's, I think Josh's presentation. But it's always fascinating to me that there's all these various historical societies and foundations out there And if you're interested, you can go find out as much information as you like about the history of in this case, the B-26. So let me take this down, and we're going to go to Josh's discussion first. And this is going to be, if I can get the right one, where to go, Josh? Here you are. This is going to be about Josh's grandfather, Lieutenant Colonel Jim Muri. Okay, Josh, everybody seeing that okay? Okay. Josh, you've got the floor. What a great...
Gotta unmute him.
Oh, he's muted again. Oh, don't know how that happened.
Sorry, I'm still at work and I had to go close some doors. I had to put myself on mute. Okay, here we go. I want to talk about my grandfather. In this picture, this particular slide here on the top, I'm visiting him just a couple of years ago as I flew into Miles City. My grandfather was born there in Custer County in Montana, and that's where he's at, in Miles City at the National Cemetery. The bottom photo here is myself with him about 13 years ago. Maybe 14. He passed away 13 years ago this week. And the top right, there's a picture of me with a B-26 and the nose art Susie-Q, which is my grandmother's nickname that my grandfather gave her. So that we'll talk more about that plane in a few minutes. As mentioned, he always wanted to be a pilot, so he enlisted in 1936. So he's one of the very old people for World War II, if you would say that. I mentioned he enlisted right out of high school and went to some training in Chanute to become a welder, and took a year of college, and eventually was able to get into pilot training. And it says here in 1937 he was at March Field, but I have a basketball small pendant trophy of his. He was quite the athlete at 6'4", and
Wow.
so I do have a small souvenir from March Field championship basketball team from years ago.
A giant of a man for 1936 or 7.
That's right. Yeah, he was a big guy. I'm almost maybe as tall as he was, so that's not that's good. So then he transferred over to Langley and learned how to fly the B-26. And you can go to the next one.
And this was the early version of the B-26.
Yeah, they were brand new, so he was one of the first crew to get on there. And after the Pearl Harbor date, so the day after the most infamous day in history, his group was told to get ready to go, and they packed up and they were reassigned to Muroc Army Field. Now, in my enlisted days in 1992, my first base after training was Edwards Air Force Base. So when I called to tell him I was going to Edwards, his big old voice would say, "Oh, Muroc Field, do I have some stories for you?" He had a lot of stories about Muroc Field, which was barely a mud lake in his days, and they lived in tents out there for months while they were training and or patrolling the area. And one of the most important things on his way there, before he got to Muroc Field, him and some friends, they stopped into Tucson, Arizona. And on Christmas Day, 1941, was the day he married my grandmother. That was a big part of that whole transition to go to war for him.
Okay. And from California, he's transferred to Hawaii.
Yes, and very important to note that these were early B-26s. So in their case, I think they took trains out there. He, of course, flew a plane, and a lot of stuff went by train. But when they got to San Francisco, they took the planes apart, and they all got on boats with the planes. The early B-26s were the clip wings, shorter wings that Nick was referring to. And there was no belief at that time that the planes could actually fly all the way to Hawaii. So they had to go by boat and then get put back together. And that was in December, of course. And so a lot of training in Hawaii. I think you can go to the next one, maybe. Where are we at?
The next one is the Battle of Midway shot. So maybe we set up. He's in Hawaii. He's training with his squadron, I imagine.
Yeah, they were doing training, and this is where he got the airplane assigned to him and put the Susie-Q on there. And him and another gentleman from the 22nd Bomb Group, Herbert Mays, were chosen to stay behind as the rest of their 22nd Bomb Group went off to Australia or New Guinea. And his training included dropping torpedoes from airplanes for the first time off a B-26. I don't think they understood at that time why they were training that way. And but eventually they got orders to head out to Midway Island and wait to do something bigger.
So this would have been, April, May of 42, before the Battle of Midway, which occurs on June 4th, 42, of course. And hard to know exactly, the timing of it, but just somewhere before the Battle of Midway, what's left of his squadron is sent to Midway. And again, they took a boat to Midway. They didn't fly to Midway. Is that right?
No, they flew to Midway. And in this case, this is the crew that went for his airplane, and there was one other 22nd Bomb Group plane. Herbert Mays flew out there, and then there was two other planes from the 408, I believe, that Jim Collins, who also made it out of the battle, and Lieutenant Watson, who plane also went down, and they were MIA and still are. So, actually, a few years ago, my wife and I were in Hawaii, and we went to the Punchbowl National Cemetery and looked up all the names there and took pictures of all of the names on all the MIA memorials there. And quite a sight to see if you haven't been to Hawaii and been to that cemetery. It's quite a sight. Yeah.
It's a moving cemetery. I've been there. So June 4th, 1942. Have that date right? I think I do. The Japanese are sighted coming to Midway. And let me get to the next shot here. Tell us what your grandfather does. Well, if I can get a cursor to work, here we go. During the Battle of Midway.
So, this way we heard the story for years is that they didn't really understand why they were at Midway. Some of them, many of the pilots, there were a lot of planes there, but this was a naval battle, of course, and there were just a few Army Air Force airplanes there and crew. But on the day of June 4th, they got instructions to go to 295 degrees at about 190 miles. And the way he always told the story would be, you'll find your target. With the 4 B-26s, they sent 6 other airplanes, TBFs, and they were also torpedo bombers. So no real bombs, no real guns, no fighter escorts, but there they were headed out. Well, they got there first. The other planes were mobilizing, but these are the ones that got there quite a bit early.
And Josh, just to be clear, at this point, the B-26 is carrying torpedoes, not bombs. 1
torpedo each. That was it. And guns.
1 torpedo.
Yes. And they'd never aimed them at anything. Moving ships were never in their purview. They just, where are we going here? We're going to this place and hopefully we find a target. And, you think about these pilots, they're, my grandpa, I think, was 24 at the time. The other ones were probably younger than that. Navigation aids in the middle of the Pacific Ocean at the time, weather, who knows, but there they were headed at compass heading and some distance that they're going to calculate. How important was the navigator on these things?
And they run into the Japanese fleet.
They eventually get swarmed by Zeros and anti-aircraft and ships shooting at them. And the way Grandpa tells it, he's yelling at the guy to drop the fish, and let's make this plane a little more maneuverable, the fish being the torpedo. And this picture here is Roy Grinnell's a pretty well-known aviation and or military artist. You can look up his art. He's passed away a few years ago, but his art is still available. And actually, I found a copy of this, a print of this in the museum at Oshkosh last summer. So they are still available. This is the artist rendition of his story where Grandpa tells it that it was the safest place for him to be, to get his thoughts and get the crew safe. That, of course, is the Japanese aircraft carrier Akagi that he's flying over, not a U.S. aircraft carrier. And so the Zeros aren't shooting at him. The guns on the carrier aren't shooting at him. And he's able to, fly down the deck of this aircraft carrier and, according to him, see the eyes wide open of the crew on top of the aircraft carrier.
So he's launched his torpedo already.
Yeah, he got rid of that thing as soon as he got near the boats. He's tried to aim it and get rid of it. So, I have some quotes here. Go ahead. Sorry, you had a question.
Yeah, he in effect is buzzing the aircraft carrier Akagi,
That's right.
which is obviously relatively early in the sequence of the battle because this aircraft carrier gets sunk perhaps a couple hours later by the Navy dive bombers. So this is early in the sequence of the events of the battle. Okay. You had some quotes?
Yeah, so on the Akagi is Admiral Nagumo is actually on the Akagi. And with him is Commander Fuchida, Matsuo Fuchida, who led the attack on Pearl Harbor just 6 months earlier. And the quotes that are documented in books from people who interviewed them after the war, you know, they say it popped up like a bird flushed from a nesting bush, referencing how Grandpa was flying below the actually elevation of the deck and had to pop up to get over the deck in this case.
Wow.
And he says, my memory of the action, the plane was poised over the end of the flight deck looking for a way to go. He said, would that bird dare violate the Admiral's sacred space? And yeah, so it's quite a feat. And because of this, you know, they say due to these, the quote is, due to these American kamikazes, Nagumo had their planes rearmed for air to ground instead of air defense. While this was happening, and while the planes were being fueled with bombs and on the deck of the ships, is when the SBDs finally found them. So if you know the story of Midway, you know these first attacks where most of these airplanes were shot down. 4 B-26s went in, 2 made it out. Jim Collins and my grandfather Jim Muri. On his way back to Midway, after he had left the deck here, the story is that they were faster than the Zeros. So it just took a minute for them to get away and start making their way back towards the island, but they didn't know where the island was because they were a little bit lost at that point. Eventually they were doing square turns and they found or they located some smoke in the distance and thought, oh, let's go that direction. And as they got to the island, the Marines started shooting at them because they thought they were Japanese aircraft coming in. So they had to go around and try it again. And this airplane, the Susie-Q here, was shot all up and had no hydraulics, no brakes. And they did make it, did a safe landing. The air crew is all still there after the landing. That's all 6. So in this case, there were 7 because my grandfather's not in that picture. He's on the right side in Hawaii already. So right after the landing, they basically debriefed him in Hawaii to find out what happened.
But
back to the
Susie-Q is so shot up, it's just bulldozed into the ocean. No attempt.
No attempt to save that thing. Over 500 bullet holes and cannon shot through it, and some of the crew were a little bit shot up, but you can't tell much in this picture.
No.
They bulldozed it. Probably still there in the lagoon. I thought, you know, maybe someday I'd go look for it, but probably not. That would be interesting. This is the actual nose art on the airplane, of course, and on the right side, my grandfather holding it in Hawaii, but we don't know where it is today. But going back to Midway, if you go back a slide, the story is so amazing. The MHS, we were in Washington, D.C. for I think it was at the time the 75th anniversary of Midway. And while we were there at the World War II memorial with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, we found a Navy veteran who was wearing his uniform from the day of Battle of Midway. I had a conversation with him and asked what he did there at the Battle of Midway. And he was on the submarine Nautilus. And I said, oh, what were you doing there? And nobody really understood that they were actually there. And they were watching from a distance. They weren't actually involved. But a Japanese destroyer saw them and followed them and chased them away from the battle. And at some point, apparently the destroyer figured they were getting too far away. And so they turned around, let the Nautilus go, and they very quickly went back towards the battle. And when they did that, of course, if you've seen the movie and read the books, there was a big white trail left behind them in the ocean. And that is when the SBDs saw the trail and decided to follow that, and then found all of these aircraft carriers being reloaded with their airplanes going for air to ground instead of air to air defense. And on that day, there were 3 Japanese aircraft carriers sunk and another one the next day. So this is what the B-26, you know, there's a lot of talk about the credit of this particular, not just maybe flying down the deck, scaring Nagumo or thinking, what are these guys doing? We're still being attacked from the ground. So rearming for air to ground. It's a shame that these B-26s and TPFs and other airplanes. A lot of people were shot down that day, but that mission is an extremely important turning point in the war. I did reference, I'm talking a lot, but I did reference on the bottom here, this is a video created by the creators of a video game called War Thunder. And they do an excellent job of doing a reenactment that almost is lifelike. You can see my grandfather in the plane as he goes through his mission. And it's very, very, very cool. So if you have a chance to look at that, I would recommend doing it.
Okay. Okay. So your grandfather lives through this experience, makes it back to Hawaii to be debriefed. And what does he do for the rest of the war?
They sent him back to the States, and he was training other pilots how to drop torpedoes and stuff. He went to Eglin Air Force Base and did some training there. So, yeah, that was his one and only mission in the war. Yeah, you mentioned earlier when we talked, he was considered a granddaddy or, you know, old man at the times already, being 24 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a great story. One that I did not know. I mean, I knew there were land-based bombers that flew, I think B-17s as well, from Midway that had very little impact on the battle, but I didn't know this story about the B-26s and your father. So,
and it's very important to note as well. I do want to make a note when you talk about, like, even the movie, the last movie. There was two movies, of course, at Midway. One with Charlton Heston and the latest one with Woody Harrelson. And they do show the B-26s in the latest one, but they show them at some ungodly altitude dropping bombs. And that's not what the mission really was at the B-26s in most of the cases. They were very effective at low altitude bombing. And in this case, 150 feet off the ocean trying to get a torpedo off.
Yeah.
Here, I want to show a picture. If we had the opportunity last summer to go to a B-26 reunion with the Marauder Historical Society. Again, I'm the president of that. But and Dave Koski in the Maps Museum hosted us. And I do have an airplane, so I did follow a little bit in Grandpa's footsteps. I wasn't a military pilot, but I did become a pilot, and I have my airplane there. And I thought, what an opportunity, because at the museum there, somebody took it upon themselves years ago to add Susie-Q on the right side of the airplane as nose art in honor of my grandfather. And I thought, well, heck, I'm taking my airplane. They were kind enough to let me taxi my airplane into the museum area and park next to it, and I got that once in a lifetime picture there.
Great picture.
The insignia on the back of there is the 22nd Bomb Group Red Raiders. So,
yeah. Okay. And
I want to highlight.
Are there any flying B-26s?
There are no flying B-26s, and somebody's going to argue with me. We'll talk about that in a second. There are 7 in the world that you can maybe physically get to and touch. We talked about the one on Utah Beach, Dynamite. And the United States Air Force Museum, Dayton, has Shootin' In. National Air and Space Museum has Flak Bait, which flew more missions than any other medium-sized bomber in World War II. And Ron may want to add to that. I think it was 202. I wanted to say 2. Good. There's been some argument about that, but Ron is the ultimate expert on anything to do with Flak Bait. So if you have any questions, you can go to him with that. By the way, the B-26 was also the most successful bomber, basically, in World War II with regard to loss rate. Once they got through those early issues, they flew like crazy in World War II, and with little to no fighter escort, they had the best loss rates of any other bomber. And again, Maps Museum has that B-26, which is actually Charlie's Jewel on the left side. They call it Charlie's Jewel for nose art, but the right side is in honor of my grandfather, Susie-Q. Fantasy of Flight is the last B-26 existing to have flown. It flew the last time, I think, in 1998. It's owned by Kermit Weeks. Could it fly again? Maybe. Kermit says that lots of work needs to be done, but nobody in their right mind would probably fly that thing. You would hate to lose something like that. And but that doesn't mean Kermit would, because maybe he's not in his right mind. And there are 2 currently under restoration at French Valley Airport in Murrieta, California. One is slated to go to the Pima Air and Space Museum. And we were hoping it would be there this year while we had our reunion just last fall. It's not there yet, but there'll be another place to go see one. And the other one, I'm not sure where it's going. I think somewhere in Utah, but not positive.
Excellent. Excellent. And just your last slide here about these organizations. Your organization.
Yes, we are the B-26 Historical Society. We have lots of members, a few that are, children, grandchildren, uncles, nieces, and, we're looking for people who have interest. And we do have reunions every year, and we have lots of historical information. And you're welcome to come see us on Facebook, join our group. We do have a reunion every year, so that's also something great. And if you want to ask questions, our Facebook information is right there. We are pretty active on there.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I took the PowerPoint down. And of course, the first part of this last year, we interviewed a B-26 veteran, Willie Williamson, who I think was 102.
Yep.
Are there do you know of other B-26 veterans, either pilots, any crew members that are still alive?
We've had a rough year or two. We've lost some pretty close friends and veterans in our group. But we do know that there's a couple more maybe that we know of. But, I think a year or two ago, something like 500 a day World War II veterans were passing away. And of course, that number is going down per day, but that's because there's probably less.
Last I heard, something like 60, 70,000 perhaps World War II veterans left in total. So, okay.
We do have quite a few videos of, in our group years ago, somebody took it upon themselves to go around and videotape a lot of our veterans. Probably, it was 25 years ago they did that. So we do have archived quite a few veterans giving their stories. And so we hope to share those with people someday.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Todd, anything in the chat room? I haven't been watching the chat. Can we answer any questions? Does anybody in the audience want to bring up a point or ask a question of Josh?
The great Ben Wright has noted here in the chat that B-26 Marauders were also flown in Korea. And that raises the question that I had when I seem to remember B-26s maybe even in Vietnam. Is that true? When were they phased out?
No, they were phased out after World War II. So after World War II, they were pretty much done being used in military aircraft. In Korea and Vietnam, they were A-26s, the Douglas Intruder. However, they were also sometimes classified as a B-26, but it was a completely different aircraft. Similar twin engine, but three-bladed prop, not a four-bladed prop, and a different tail, but different looks and similar mission kind of thing.
Are you telling me they were called B-26s, but they weren't the same as the World War II B-26s?
That's correct. Even a few years ago, I was at Oshkosh going through the Warbirds Museum on a tour, and the tour guide said, "Hey, there's a B-26," and I jumped off the thing and I said, "Where?" And it was an A-26. However, on the serial number tag on the back, it certainly did mention B-26, but it was a Douglas Intruder and not a Martin Marauder.
Oh, okay. So that does explain my confusion. Ed,
could you have him give us some figures of how fast the 26 flew? What was its normal flight speed? What was the armament on the 26? How many bombs did it really carry? And then anything else that has to do with the actual function of the plane. Can he do that for me?
I don't think he could do that. I don't think he can.
And if he can't, Ed, he's going to start doing push-ups for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, for you, I'm still on my computer here, but
I know
no
that
cheating. No cheating, Josh.
I know.
Ron molested.
I know some of those answers, but I know that they generally carried. They could carry up to 4,000 pounds of armaments. And they generally had 11 or 12. The later models had 11 or 12 50 calibers on it. So it packed a pretty big punch.
And I can tell you that my grandfather flew a clip wing B-26, which may be a little faster than some of the later generations with the longer wings. Yeah. And if you read the books or the story about his flight at Midway, he had those throttles pegged and he went over the manifold pressure quite a bit, way over what the recommendations were, and had that thing flying well over 325 miles an hour. The specs on it typically are somewhere 285 to 290. but we do know that, in fact, that it goes over 300 miles an hour. The service ceiling was something like 14,000 feet. But, you know, obviously they didn't carry a lot of oxygen. They got cold, so they were usually flying at 10,000 feet or lower. Does that help answering those questions? Are there more that we missed?
Thank you.
Is that faster than your P-47 went, Ed?
What?
Is that faster speed than your
No,
P-47?
slower.
Slower.
Yeah, our cruising speed was 365 mile an hour. And and then if we throttled back, we would go down to 150 mile an hour.
That was the landing speed of the B-26.
Yeah, you get a little lower than that, you would do your little loop.
Because of the short wingspan, the landing speed of the early B-26s was just right around 150 miles an hour.
150 mile an hour?
Yep.
Yeah, touchdown.
Holy jumping.
That's why there were so many early accidents, and that's some of the big reason for the longer wings and bigger tails, so they could bring that speed down a bit.
How long a runway were they most comfortable with?
Oh no, now you're asking questions I don't know the answer to. I don't know, but there was a lot of those gravel and backfield runways that they were on. Maybe Ron knows.
No, I just know that they took a long time to get off, especially under heavy load. That they took a long field to take off because the incidence was not right to get them up in the air. And I have a bunch of B-26 Marauder. I fly remote model airplanes, and those suckers take a long time to get up in the air.
Okay. Good, thank you.
Hey, I want to say hi to our friend from Northeast Ohio, Barb Smith. Hello, Barb.
Hello from Madrid.
Oh, you're in Madrid right now.
Still in Madrid. Yes, we leave tomorrow. Have been to Barcelona, Segovia. We're going to Cordoba tomorrow, Cadiz, Gibraltar. Maybe swing over to Tangier, Morocco. Been to, I said Barcelona. Anyway, yeah, having a great time. Should be home
like
after my
1 in the
birthday.
morning there?
It's yes. I'll try to stay awake this time. 1:42. I didn't do so well at the documentary, and I probably embarrassed myself. So sorry about that. So I wanted to know if Josh was a member at Matt's museum.
Maps Museum?
Yeah, are you a member? I'm
Well,
from
I don't know
Oberlin.
Okay, we were there. We had our reunion there last summer.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. It was now 2 summers ago. Last year we were.
So you're not from Akron?
No, I'm not from Akron. But that picture you saw was in Akron.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Perfect. Thank you so much.
And the MAPS Museum is a Military Aviation Preservation Society museum that's in North Canton, Ohio. It's a wonderful museum, a kind of I think underrated, is that what undersung museum that more people should know about, more people should visit. And Debbie Bussinger is the new museum director, and she's often on our program. We had the great delight of traveling with her to Vietnam, so on our trip. So yeah, we're very familiar with the MAPS Museum.
And just to reiterate, it's one of 3 places in the world where you can walk in and see and touch a B-26.
Yes.
The other ones you can't get to. There's only 3 you can actually walk in and see in a museum. They got a hangar and everything. It's really nice.
I think we've got to do a day trip there.
Yeah.
From Pittsburgh.
What's that? Less than 2 hours, right? From Pittsburgh.
Yep.
We can get you set up with Dave Posky. That's the guy.
We know the guy.
Good.
Todd, they have pancake breakfasts on Sundays a couple times a year.
Oh, then I'm there.
The website.
I love pancakes.
Yeah.
He's there tomorrow. So why don't we move to Nick's story if we're ready? Todd, anybody else? Anything else to address? No? Okay. Let me share the screen again. Because Nick's story about his uncle is just exceptional. Okay.
All set.
Cressy, this floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Good to see all you folks again. Glad to be here. I'm going to talk about the 80th anniversary memorial for my uncle's crew, the B-26. It was My Gal 2 was the nose art name in Fontaine, France. And it was 19 January last month. I was there celebrating the 80th memorial for the my uncle's crew. Go to the, yeah, I wrote a book about him. A gentleman by the name of Henry DeCray contacted my mother in 1983 and said that we're putting up a permanent memorial for your brother and his crew, and we'd like you to come here and visit. Well, my mother was not able to go, but at that point, I found out what bomb group my uncle was in, what squadron he was in, or what kind of aircraft he flew in, because we didn't know. I mean, my mother didn't know. So I put together a lot of research over time. And after I retired from the Army, I wrote a book. So that's the book. And Henry's son, Daniel, is carried forward to keep the memorial going. So if you could get to the next slide. This is a picture. These are pictures of my uncle in Conus. Conus is the continental United States, for those of you that are not military and don't know the acronyms. But these are pictures of him in various training bases. Next slide, please. This is the route that he took to transfer aircraft to Sardinia when he flew over. This is was known as the Southern Route. And the balloon stuff that I have indications there are the airfields that he stopped at before he ended up in Sardinia delivering the aircraft.
It's incredibly well described in the book. I found it fascinating. It's like a travel log, right? This is also the route, more or less, I think maybe exactly the route that FDR took to get to the Casablanca conference.
It's pretty close to that. It really is, because it was the safest, and they didn't really have that horrible winter weather over the north side of the route. So, but this was safer.
And for a B-26, you know, with the less range than the heavies. How long did this take, Nick? As I recall,
I'm trying to remember what I put in the book. I think it was probably 2 weeks, almost 3 weeks before they got there. They did have some mechanical issues on the way in, but those were resolved and they kept going. And then made it to their base. And he probably arrived at his first assignment. And you can click through that slide there to 3. His first assignment was at Sardinia, and then they moved up to Corsica, and then ended up at Dijon, France. And of course, the targets that he went after in Sardinia and Corsica were Italian targets. And then, of course, in August of '44, they supported the Operation Dragoon in southern France. And of course, all those targets got moved pretty far up, that they were way too far from their targets, so they had to move somewhere else. So they ended up in Dijon, France by the end of October, November, into November of 1944.
And I have to say, as I read the book, I'm always learning about World War II. I had no idea that the U.S. bombers, in this case B-26, were stationed in Sardinia and then Corsica, obviously supporting the troops, the movements in Italy as we moved up from Salerno past Naples and Rome, of course, and further north.
Right. There were mostly medium bomb groups out of Sardinia and Corsica. The heavies were with the 15th Air Force,
right,
more to the east of this area in the Italy's, the safe areas of Italy. Those were the heavy bombers that actually would go up into Germany as well. But there are mostly medium bomb groups that were on Sardinia and Corsica.
And again, as you describe in your book, which is so good, some of these missions, these are, again, tactical mission, taking out a bridge, taking out supply depot, etc. Right? And
that is correct.
Yeah, very different than all the stories of the heavy bomb groups.
Right, and I did go to the National Archives and looked up every mission that he had. You know, of course, what I wanted to find out was when did he get overseas and when was his first mission. And I did find that out in the National Archives and picked up all that information.
Oh, I'm sorry, Nick, I'm just clicking through. I forgot that there were these sort of bullet point things you had here.
Okay. No, that's all right. You're good to go.
Okay.
You can go to the next slide. This is the tent areas in Longcourt, which was about 5 miles outside of Dijon Field. In fact, I was there last month. Of course, the tents weren't out there, but the chateaus that they were in, they still had their World War II sayings on the walls everywhere. And so they were there. They were built around 1400s, 1490s. And one of the larger chateaus is being restored by the owner, who is the family, descendant of the family that first built the chateau in the 1400s. So they're still there. So I had to visit that area. But this was what the winter looked like towards his last mission there. Lots of snow. And of course, we know what the winter was like in the last part of World War II in Europe. It was pretty bad. The focus of the memorial was the last mission that he had, and that was to go after marshalling areas in Germany and some supply areas as a secondary target. They left out of Dijon and they went to meet their P-47 escorts. They were late, so they had to circle around until they showed up, and then they headed over the target across the Rhine River. My uncle's plane developed an engine problem on the right side, the right engine, the starboard side, and it actually froze up, and the propeller did not feather. It windmilled. Now that acts like a big brake on the right side. So the plane was getting hard to handle. So they dropped out. They got directions to head back to base. And they were directed to a recovery field in Dole, which was southeast of Dijon Field. And they didn't make it. But I do have in the book, I do have the actual transcript of the control tower talking with the pilot. And, you can just see the caution in the pilot's voice as far as what was recorded. Where they ended up is just over Besançon, flew over an army hospital and made it to an open field about 5 miles southwest of the city. Well, on my trip overseas last month, I actually got in a private plane, and the pilot actually took me on the flight path that they would have taken coming over Besançon and over the army hospital, and then headed to the field. And quite frankly, that area of France is not very flat. There's some open farm fields, of course. It's a beautiful area, but there were some very high ridges coming over the city. And I thought, I made a comment to the pilot, and I said, you know what, that's I don't know where I'm going to put this thing down if I had to land. Well, once we made it over our second ridge past the south of the city, we could see an open field, and that's where they went into the field. And these are some of the pictures from the Army Air Force after the accident. You can scroll through some of these, Glenn. These were taken the day after. It actually snowed that night on the 19th. These are more pictures. More.
The debris field is incredible.
Quite large, yes. I was actually, when I was there last month, I met 3 people that actually witnessed this event. One lady who was 11 years old at the time, she's 91 now. She remembers the horrible noise that it made coming in and then crashing and tearing apart. And these are scraps from the plane, and I have these. They gave them to me, and I brought them back with me from my trip. So I have these in my possession, but these are from the accident that were not picked up by the Army Air Force.
And do we know what they are? What are they?
The ones on the right, that's actually 2 pictures of the same thing. It's just turned over.
Okay.
I went and talked to our restoration guy at the museum that I work at, and he said it's probably a part of a wing with a wing strut area for some reason on the right side. The other side, the one on the left, that round object there is probably a battery cover, because it's not metal. It's kind of like a pressed board of some kind. And the other piece there is from a nacelle. And then, of course, you see those are plexiglass from there, from the airplane. Also, what happened there too is that the parachutes actually popped open. So they took the parachute silk and they used it, but I got pieces of the parachutes as well. One thing I wanted to talk about, in the mid-90s, they found my uncle's, I don't know if you can see this real easy. They found my uncle's ID bracelet that he was wearing when he was killed.
You're holding, yeah, he's holding, Nick's holding that up. That's not
Yeah.
Can you see it okay, Todd?
Well, because the sharing the screen, we can't see it too well. Maybe if you stop sharing the screen. All right.
Okay.
Now, there we go. Yep. Oh my gosh.
That's a miracle.
Well, what happened with this is where this came from is that my uncle's wife, he got married before he went overseas, gave him this ID bracelet. And on the reverse side of it, it says, "This man belongs to me," signed Mary. So I have this artifact from when he was killed that day.
How long did his wife survive after the war?
She remarried 2 years after he was killed, and then she actually had a cancer of some kind. She only lived till about 55 years old, but my mother kept in touch with her, and I remember meeting her at least once, one time. So she didn't live very long after the war because of a cancer diagnosis.
Yeah. This reminds us of the tragedy of the people back home.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, this picture right here is actually a wooden cross that Mr. Bouchard actually put up out in the field at the location where the crash was as a memorial to the crew. And in that box that you see at the bottom there are parts of the plane and body parts. Excuse me. Well, that cross was replaced by the memorial. And I think if you want to keep going to the next slide here. Oh, okay, I'll talk about this and then we'll go to the memorial. These are all the crew that were killed. The three at the top are crew that are still in France. They're at Epinal. And I went and visited them when I was out there and paid my respects. On the lower tier there on the left, Todd Hammer, he is in California. I have not visited him yet. The middle on the bottom, Lloyd Rawl. I went and saw him in Michigan. And then, of course, to the lower right, that's my uncle's grave marker in Troy, Michigan. Okay, and what they did at the memorial was this, the sign that's on the left there was there when I visited there in 2010. And what they did on the right is they made it an impasse, which in French is a cul-de-sac. So it's an official road named for my uncle's plane.
Mm-hmm.
Next slide, please. This is the ceremony. At the top on the left is an added feature at the memorial that shows what happened that day and the story. And the next one on the top is some of the dignitaries that were there, and yours truly is there at the end. You can't see me at the top picture. The floral presentations and laid at the memorial that's there, and then on the lower right is yours truly in my uniform giving a speech, and that's translated to French after I'm talking. And
you in the lower right.
Lower right is me, yeah.
Quite impressive, Colonel.
Yeah, that's with all my fruit salad on my chest. So, next slide. These are the presentations from the French military and local and department officials. The mayor, department is like a state, I believe, in France, and then the county officials that are equivalent county officials. We're all there to provide, a respect for this presentation, dedication, and there are well over 300 people that were there.
Wow.
Okay, next slide. Daniel DeCray, he is the one that set up this association that's managing the memorial right now. So when you go there, you'll see that board on the side, the headstone with the bushes around it, the flagpoles. And of course, it's an official cul-de-sac on their maps, street maps in that part of France and Fontaine. So I think that's my last slide.
Yeah. That's very, very well done. What a great story. Let me ask the first question if I could. And I didn't think about this actually, Nick, in our last few discussions before this program. The French are obviously providing a huge honor to the men of this crew who perished, right? It's just
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was I felt like I was a celebrity. I got a lot of attention. I don't mind that, but it was just kind of emotional and how they were so dedicated to keeping the memory alive of these 6 crewmen that sacrificed themselves for French liberation.
So this is my question, and I'm having a little trouble finding the right phrasing because I don't want it to sound incorrect or inappropriate. So there must have been hundreds of bomb crews crash in Europe during World War II and in France. Scores
Yes.
and scores. Not all of them, I'm sure, are afforded this kind of honor. Do you know what it is about this particular story that the French find so fascinating?
The only thing I can think of is some comments made by a gentleman that flew with my uncle that I met years ago at a reunion. He's since passed away. But they did not, for some reason, dump their bomb loads in Germany after they had trouble with the engine. They didn't drop it over France. They didn't let them bail out and let the plane go wherever it would end up. They decided to take it in and belly in and save themselves and not destroy any French property. That's the only thing I can think of is why they place a special honor on that, is because they really didn't want to hurt anybody else. And they found a nice open field that was safe. Let's go in here. And of course, what happened was the left side, the port engine, there was power added to the engine and the torque took it off to the side, and the airplane spun in and broke the plane apart and killed the crew.
And now that you say that, I recall in the book, and it's been several months since I read the book, but just before the crash takes place, there is some discussion about, do we bail out? Do we land? What do we do?
Right.
And was it the pilot, the commander, obviously, who made that final decision?
Yeah, I gathered this from what was read in the transcripts with the tower information, but also with the pilot. It was the commanding officer of my uncle's squadron, has said about the pilot that's what he probably did, that he'd bring it in that way. And that's where I got that from. So I got it from an interview with Captain O'Mahony, actually, is what his name is, Chuck O'Mahony. Okay. He was the mission commander that day, actually, and the plane that my uncle was on was actually a tail end Charlie as a spare, just in case somebody couldn't go into the target. They would be there.
Yeah. Wow, what a story of bravery and sacrifice! It gives me chills. Todd, let's stop here and see if there's questions, comments, anything in the chat room.
Nick, I have a question. So you're saying that they could have bailed.
Yes.
That was one option they could have taken. They could have bailed and let the plane go wherever it was going to go.
Right. Yeah, they had just made it over German territory and they had to turn around and come back. So they were over French territory very quickly.
Right.
Like I said, they didn't want to drop anything on French territory. They'd been through enough. That part of France was liberated into September, October of 44 after the Operation Dragoon landings, and they were still fighting pretty hard in the Colmar Pocket near the Vosges Mountains. Right. But they didn't want to drop it on French civilians. They'd gone enough. They'd seen enough. They'd been hurt badly enough. Don't do that. Try and bring it in. Let's save lives if we can.
And they had enough altitude where they could have parachuted.
Oh yeah, at that point, yes. But of course, the closer they got to Besançon, they couldn't go out. Now, when they crashed, of course, the parachute packs were not on each person. They were still in their storage compartments. And of course, on the crash, they were split open from the impact. So they did not have their parachutes on when they were in fixed positions. They were in the crash positions of the plane when it crashed. And the way they knew that is because of the way the bodies were spread out when the plane opened up and crashed and tore apart. They could tell that they were right next to each other. They weren't in their fighting positions.
We have a question from the YouTube side, from YouTube for Josh.
Okay.
Josh?
Yeah.
The question is, why was your grandpa only carrying one torpedo? Were the torpedoes that heavy that only one could be carried?
Yes, they were large and heavy, and that's all the stations they had on the B-26. There was right under the bomb bay door. During taxi and while the torpedo was installed, there was like 4-inch clearance for the torpedo. So it was the World War II history of torpedoes wasn't great for the United States. They weren't very good, very accurate, but that's what they were carrying.
And they could only carry one.
And it was the first time they'd ever tried that on a B-26.
Okay.
Not a lot of success.
I imagine that didn't carry on for very long after that, because
they did some more of that in Australia. They tried it some more. So somebody thought it was successful, even though they didn't hit anything, but it was a threat, and it was, they did try it a little bit more. And I think the Aleutians maybe tried some of that as well.
And along the torpedo theme, Greg Yost, you had a question and comment.
Yes, the standard U.S. Navy submarine torpedo early in the war, fairly longer than it should have been, simply didn't work. As we know, it would regularly hit ships, hit targets. The submariner captains would come back, say, I hit this ship 4 times and none of them exploded. I don't know if that was the same type of torpedo they would have been using. I would imagine it was a fairly standard torpedo. So I hate to say this, even if he had hit a ship, it very well might have just bounced off. Sad to say.
If it was the same kind, yeah.
Yeah, sounds like the same problem they had.
We forget, very early in the war, we were still sort of making it up day to day as to, how to fight the war. This is 41, 42, not 43 and 44. And there was a lot of those kind of instances with all kinds of weapons that ended up being abandoned.
And the technology was so new.
Yeah.
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 We have Peg Dybel on. I don't know if she's going to be willing to unmute. There you are, Peg. You are on the board of directors of the Maps Museum, and you outed yourself as being on our Zoom call. So I thought I'd ask you just, give us a good pitch. Why should people come and see your museum?
Oh boy. A better question is why not, I guess. Yes, I outed myself just because that B-26 Society reunion was such a terrific time for us. Josh, everything that you and your folks put together for all of the sessions that you did, just really amazing information. But the one thing that sticks in my mind from that time was that there were 2, I believe, correct, Josh, 2 World War II Marauder veterans who were there.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, we had, at that time, we had Jerry Rashke attended that.
Right.
And they've both since passed away, both Stan Walsh and Jerry Rashke. And while they were there, though, we had them interviewed by local news agencies. And you can still find those interviews, great interviews they did. And Ron also is a historian for us. And Ron did some interviews with them, and the videos exist. They had some great stories. Jerry was also, how would you say that, Nick? He was a pastor.
Yeah, he was a minister.
Minister.
Yes,
Yeah.
and he actually flew with my uncle. He knew my uncle, so I got to know Jerry pretty well before he passed. And he is in my book.
At that particular reunion, Jerry wasn't going to make it because he did not want to have a connecting flight coming out of Springfield, where he lived, to get to Akron, Ohio. So he didn't want to fly, he didn't want to go through Chicago to then go, a 10-minute flight to a 10-minute flight kind of a thing. So we found him a volunteer group on Facebook. I connected with a pilot group, and some gentleman out of Springfield area flew him on a Cessna Citation 5 jet with some other veterans who wanted to go along from Vietnam. And they thought that was the greatest thing. They flew with him and talked to him the whole time. And he got off the airplane, taxied right into the Maps Museum, where they helped him get off the plane. And man, did he have a lot to see. He had a great time there. Thank you, Peg, for all of that. That was an excellent experience.
Yeah, it was for us as well. But the last time that that our Marauder will ever leave the hangar was for that reunion, and our guys, Dave Pauly and Dave Connor, pulled it out with a tug, got the 2 World War II vets in it, and then taxied them around our tarmac.
Yeah, I was in there as well. We got to get in there.
Oh, you were?
Pretend like we were flying. And
Yeah, I got to be in the co-pilot seat. Yes, I
that's
enjoyed that. I made a video of it too.
Super. Yeah. That's just such a great memory for me, because we just never see the B-26 out of its corner in the hangar, you know. So so it was really a great weekend. But we have all kinds of things there. We have our Gallery of Heroes. We have the Ohio Military Museum that's merged with us. We now have a military aviation art gallery, which is quite extensive and quite well done. Last September, the Super Saber room was opened by the Friends of the Super Saber and the Super Saber Society. They had a big reunion. It's really, I think, going to be the last one that they're going to hold. And it's primarily, it was primarily pilots and crew chiefs. So that was quite an event when we opened that room for all of those guys. So had I think there were about 90 or so of those folks that showed up. So yeah, and then we have a very large restoration program that goes on, and the Marauder's just so special for us because it's been 20 plus years in restoration, and so many of our restorers, so many of the guys, we have a lot of women that restore now as well, but the guys in particular that have just been with that plane and adding to it. Ironically, right now it's got some bombs in the bomb bay, but the guys also built a torpedo, which they have attached.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Because it's got my grandfather's nose art on it, so they have to go with the torpedo.
It does, yes, it does. And I'm so glad you told that story, because I've always loved that nose art and didn't know where it came from. So now I do. So
well, maybe the gentleman, you had a aircraft painter working for you, and I'm not sure his name, I forget his name, but the guy who created that nose art for you guys, he's made a few others and shipped them. They shipped me one. Dave said, "What's your address?" And he shipped me a big replica nose art that I have in my hangar with my airplane now. And yeah, that was a pretty cool thing for us to see. And that's why you saw I had to fly my airplane there, because there was no other way I was going to get that cool of picture. So,
yeah, that's terrific. We also sponsor lots of organizations. I think we have 3 Boy Scout, 1 Girl Scout troop. We have airborne, World War II airborne reenactors. We have Civil Air Patrol. We have Air Academy. And one thing that occurred to me is, I'll have to send you more information on this, Todd, but the airborne reenactors, those kids are putting together a 2-day weekend. I think it's in July. Going to be a big deal with a lot of World War II stuff going on. So I will send you that information. I'm not sure of the dates. It's just not coming to me right now. There's a lot of events that go on there, but so I'll send that information to you and forward you in case anybody wants to visit for that.
Thank you so much, Peg, and thank you for outing yourself and joining us and sharing about the museum. I appreciate that. I thought we would take a station break just so we can remind people that this is the Veterans Breakfast Club. We're a nonprofit based in Pittsburgh, PA. We've been doing programs in person and online where veterans and others can come and share stories about the military experience, past and present. We are on every Monday night at 7 p.m. and we're on most Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern. We'll be back on Monday, February 10th, and we'll be doing a Valentine's Day program about military love stories. So join us if you can. will also be back a week from tonight. Glenn will be hosting a program with experts Greg Yost and Colin Heaton and others about the Yalta Conference to commemorate the 80th anniversary of that important conference that happened in February 1945. Glenn and I are also we're leading a tour. This is our second tour, our World War II Battlefields tour of Europe. It's essentially a 101st Airborne tour. We're going to start in London. We're going to end up at Eagle's Nest, south of Munich, and go to a lot of places in between, including the Normandy beaches. If you're interested in joining us, please do go to our website, veteransbreakfastclub.org/WW2 Europe, and you can learn more about the details of that trip. We have our quarterly magazine is out. They have not hit mailboxes yet. I've not received one. I don't know anybody who has, except so we send out 10,000 of these magazines every quarter to households around the country, and then I have another 7,500 that are delivered to my driveway. And most of the time, they're delivered right in front of my garage door, just as my wife wants to leave. So that means I have to get rid of them. We are sending them out fast and furious in boxes of 25, 50, and 100. If you would like a copy, if you don't get one in the mail, let us know. We'll make sure that you get one every quarter. If you want a box that put out at, say, the Maps Museum, would be happy to send you a box of 100 or so. You can put them out, give them to people who come by. This is free of charge. They are filled with wonderful stories that we hear at the Veterans Breakfast Club. And finally, I do want to thank our sponsor, and that is not our sponsor. Our sponsor is UPMC for Life. They sponsor our in-person programs and our online programs. They can help you make sense of Medicare and help you get the answers and information you need, such as how to choose the Medicare Advantage plan that's right for you. UPMC for Life has plans made by veterans for veterans, and you can learn more about their plans at upmchealthplan.com/Medicare. All right, back to you, Glenn.
Yeah, thank you very much. And just one extra point about that European Battlefields tour. Todd and I are recreating the invasion of Normandy. We are taking a ferry from Southampton to Normandy, right? So it's overnight. You get to sleep overnight. And the next morning, we go ashore at Omaha Beach. No, actually not. We're going through Cherbourg. Hopefully nobody be shooting at us.
Right.
But it'll be real fun.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Glenn, I do have a question. Now, I'm sure you're going to commit to adding to your itinerary a stop to see the B-26 at the beach there.
Utah Beach.
Yes, we will.
Josh, only if you're there.
I'm trying. I already sent it to the wife. We'll see what happens.
Yes, we are definitely going to that museum. It's a wonderful museum at Utah Beach. We did this trip back in 2018, and that was a highlight.
And only one of 3 in the world that you can go see in a museum.
I have a question of our veteran, World War II veteran, Ed Cottrell. Combination of Ed and Nick. So Nick, as part of your story on that last mission, you said that the B-26 squadron was going to meet up with P-47s to rendezvous with them for the P-47s to act as escorts. And for whatever reason, that didn't happen on that particular mission.
Well, so, it actually did happen, but they were late showing up. So they circled around. They did a couple 360s around that area. And then the P-47s did show up, and they went on to the target, the primary target. And then the primary target was overcast, so they switched to the secondary. And that's when my uncle's plane had problems.
So Ed, my question to you is, I think I know the answer of your 65 missions. Did you do any escort missions of B-26s? I saw Ed a little bit ago. Did he leave us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm muted. Let me unmute.
No, you're good. You're good.
You're good.
Oh, okay. Now, I only flew one escort mission, and it was with B-17s, and only because the 47 used so much fuel, they could only go so far. I do know that I have record of 2 fighter groups that flew escort missions for B-26s. I have actual flight record of I think the 404th was one that flew escort missions for the B-26, and they wouldn't go above 10,000 feet.
It's flying escort. I know you did it for B-17s, not for 26s. And that just reminds me of another pilot who I talked about, and he escorted B-17s and B-24s. Flying escort, what are you doing? Are you flying above them, beside them? Give me a feel. How does that work?
Most are above, and there are some at the side, depending on how many planes you have. But the Germans would always come from the top. So they were coming down, where if you were below, you could never get to them. They would be past you before you could get to them. So everybody was either on the side or on top.
And from a speed standpoint, what did you have to do? Because you were faster than the B. Did you just throttle back to match the speed?
We had to throttle back, and a lot of times, one of the reasons, again, to use fuel, we did a lot of crisscrossing, so that they would crisscross in order to take up time, so you didn't get too far ahead of the plane.
Yeah. Okay. Which reminds me, as I was thinking about that question, Todd, I'd very much, and I don't have a picture that I can throw up here, but I'm sure you'll find one real fast, Todd. And that's that I want to mention the passing of Tuskegee Airman Colonel Harry Stewart just a few days ago. It's been widely reported in the national press and lots of stories. We got to interview Harry 3 times at least that I can remember over the years. What a fine man. I mean, not just his war record, like you, Ed, his war record was just one tiny piece of an incredible life.
Yeah.
Just want to honor him and remember him. And the reason that sort of popped up in my head is I can remember asking him one time, he talked about escorting B-17s and B-24s out of Italy, right?
Yeah.
And I said, describe that to me. And he had this wonderful description. I wish I could go back and find it, talking about hundreds of these big, heavy bombers, right? And he said the picture was just something you could never imagine, right? The sky, the land, the bombers, and hundreds of escorts, P-51 escorts in that case. And he said what they used to do was they'd have upper, they'd have side, but they would weave back and forth, right? So that because of the speed difference between the two. But he offered just a great, great explanation and sort of being able to picture in my mind what that would have looked like. So Colonel Harry Stewart, here we are.
I posted a brief tribute to Harry when I learned that he passed, and I'm gratified that almost all the national obituaries reference the Veterans Breakfast Club because Harry came on twice in 2022 and then again last year and shared his story for 90 minutes. So we have a really good record of his service. And it was those were such rich programs that, the New York Times quoted it and Yahoo News quoted it. And so we have the links to these two programs here on this page. I shared it on the Zoom side, a link if you want to watch those programs with Harry. They were real special times.
Thank you.
And a really special man. I just can't emphasize that enough. Yeah. Okay. Other people, other comments, other questions from our audience of our B-26 experts.
Yeah, please do speak now. We have about 5 minutes left in the program. This is your chance to ask about the B-26.
Oops. Okay. Well, very quiet crowd tonight, Todd. Yeah. Must be we're still in mourning over the Steelers as well. So
some of that.
With that. we continuously mourn the other sports teams in town.
Right. I'm looking through here to see. No, I don't see any new questions.
See someone waving their hand.
Oh yeah, Dan Analytics Atkins. Dan Analytics Atkins. I get that. He asked in the, and I think this is a question, kind of. Oh, Rick Weber's waving his hands. Hello, Rick.
Good evening, my Fuhrer. Couple of things. I don't have a question, but you made a comment about the national news picking up on the Veterans Breakfast Club. And I always tell you, this is the best show in town. So now you're taking it nationally. So take that. And I really, it's amazing the guests you get on. The other factor is, Ed, are you on?
I'm on.
Warren on Sunday joins your 100th birthday. And I have to do a fact check. Last year, we did your 102nd birthday.
Right.
Correct?
Correct.
Okay. So you are now 103.
I'm 103.
Okay. Because they kept saying 102. They kept saying 102. And I'm saying they're shortchanging this good looking man.
Yeah.
No, I'm so sorry.
Happy birthday again. I'm sorry you can't come, but you're going to come. We're going to do Canton. Todd's going to do a bus trip. I figured it out already.
Well, I'm open to come to the Veterans Breakfast Club anytime.
That's so great.
Like you said, this is the best show on television. Absolutely the best show. And if you want to learn about our country, you need to tune into this show. It is absolutely. So, Todd, you can use my name and say and tell them that that's exactly what I said.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you so much, Ed. And thank you so much, Rick. It's such a joy to hear about history from the people who lived it. And not only, Josh and Nick talking about the B-26, but these are also veterans who feel a closeness to the story because of their service. It's not just because it was your grandfather, Josh. You served also. And I just think there's something really special about the brotherhood and sisterhood of those who have served coming together and sharing the passion that they've developed for their country and for their service. So thank you. Dan Analytics wanted to talk about the various nicknames for the B-26, the Baltimore Whore, the Martin Murderer, and you also, Dan Analytics, said something like skip bombing in the Pacific. Is that an expression of skepticism about, was there skip bombing in the Pacific? Josh?
Yes.
Nick, I think.
Nick's on mute again.
Okay.
Can you unmute Nick?
Can you hear me?
Nick. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, the skip bombing was used first started with the British in the European theater, and but it really carried over into the Southwest Pacific, and mostly by B-25s learning how to skip bomb, and also 17s, but they were too slow. But the 25s were very good at it, and some A-20 units were very good at it. And those tactics were used in going after Japanese shipping quite extensively and very effectively. So it was very, I don't recall any B-26s being involved in skip bombing though.
And I know that, so the B-26s were not involved, as you know.
I don't think they were involved in skip bombing. No, I don't think so. They were involved in some low-level tactical missions on the islands in New Guinea and the archipelago there and some of the Solomons.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you, Josh. Glenn, any last words for us?
No. Thanks very much for the night, Josh, Nick, Ron, and of course,
Thank you.
My pleasure.
And of course, Ed. Please keep dialing in on Thursday nights. Next week, a very different kind of program, more of the sort of diplomatic history with the Yalta Conference, but I think we'll draw some really interesting conclusions, inferences about the results of the Yalta Conference, sort of laying the base for the Cold War.
Yeah.
To come.
For the good and the bad.
Yeah, it's good and bad. So I think it'd be a very interesting session. So I hope to see you next week.
All right. Good night, everybody. Take care. Stay
All
warm.
right.